Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 3rd day of November. It is straight up top of the hour. I'm probably speaking over my music right now. Anyways, so we're back. We're back. This is Red Pill Reports. This is, of course, the first show ever in the history of Red Pill Reports, and we could not be more thankful for having you guys here joining us today. Listeners, you guys are just absolutely fantastic. Appreciate you guys all being here, and I cannot begin to express to you guys how excited I am to be bringing on the next guests that we have coming onto the program. Of course, we're talking about Aaron Dykes and Melissa Melton. Now, if you guys don't know who Aaron Dykes and Melissa Melton are, they are easily two of the most amazing alternative researchers and reporters that there are on the planet. I mean, these guys are the creme de la creme of alternative media, and so thankful to be forging a friendship with them, and so thankful to just have them, willing to come onto the show and talk to us about some of the things that they know and some of the things that they have been learning recently. Aaron and Melissa, can you guys hear me okay?
I believe we're coming through. Thanks for having us on, JD.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. You guys, it's absolutely my pleasure, and especially on day one when we don't know what's going to go on, the beauty of live radio and everything. It's a very exciting time, and I could not be happier to have both of you guys here. I guess we should probably start with the 101 type stuff. For people out there who don't know who you guys are, if you guys would mind, we'll start with Aaron, perhaps. Maybe you could give some of your background, talk a little bit about how you became a researcher and how you hooked up, getting connected with Melissa, and then kind of where that has taken you now, if you don't mind.
Oh boy, it seems like a long journey. I never thought about it, but the Matrix Red Pill, I guess you just take it once and then you're kind of permanently jolted into reality.
Yeah, I use the word doomed.
Instead of continually taking the delusional pill over and over again,
right,
on a regular prescription. It's bizarre. I guess waking up was gradual for me over a number of years, but obviously 9/11 was the catalyst, and I never felt like things were right with that from day one. I had a sinking feeling, and I had that terrible feeling that the whole rest of the world around me was going along with this horrible thing, and that took some getting used to, and eventually it shifted into activism, and found my way not only to the truth about things, but into being able to do something about it and write about it and get the word out about it, and found that other people were resonating and waking up and wanting to talk about this stuff and wanting to hear more, and of course it never ends from there. There's just so many issues, and I fail to ever see an end to this stuff. If you follow the chain of where it goes, it's just, especially the names and where the money comes from, it never ends.
Right. That was going to be my next question to you, actually, was like, given the fact that there are seemingly limitless issues and the agendas seem to be so deep and so, prevalent in just about every aspect, what is it that drives you? What, if you're up against this battle where you can say, well, we're just not going to win because every time we win something, there's going to be 30, 40, 50 more issues. What is it that drives you, Aaron? Is it just the desire to learn more? Is it a personal thing, or, what is that?
Well, maybe I just don't fit in. It just doesn't sit right with me. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not trying to answer for you, but I think us and most of the people on this network that we're friends with, everybody here, and a lot of the people we've worked with in the alternative media, they just want one other person to hear what they have to say, begin to start using their critical thinking skills again, and then looking at the world around them through that lens so that they can try to get more people than to listen to that guy talk about it, and then the other guy who listens to that guy, and then maybe more of us will be seeing these things and sharing these things, and more people will wake up. I think it's about getting more people to start looking at these things and figuring out what's actually going on here, and waking people up out of this zombie-like slumber that so many people are in.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a 2 hour and 16-minute long episode. It ended up being a documentary on vaccines, and by the time it was all done, and I mean, I think we stayed up 30 straight hours trying to finish it.
Oh my goodness.
Up at youtube.com/Truthstream Media. It's all this stuff about vaccines, all this research we did, lots of stuff, government research. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff in there. It goes on it's a movie length video. And at the end of it, somebody asked me, I think it was Joe Joseph of Freedom Link asked me, why'd you guys do that? Why would you make a 2-hour and 16-minute video about that? And I said, well, if one parent doesn't damage their child by these vaccines the way that my child's been damaged by vaccines, that's good enough for me. Mm-hmm. That was worth it. One parent.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. And I fully agree. I mean, the vaccine issue right now, especially with the report coming out of the CDC that they basically allowed, all of these things to happen to children with full knowledge is fully unacceptable. Fully unacceptable to me.
Well, isn't it great they have Ebola now, so they don't even have to talk about the CDC whistleblower that happened all that other stuff. That was right before all the Ebola stuff blew up, and so now that's been completely, I guess, collectively forgotten, not by some, obviously, but that was getting ready to, I mean, the CNN was breaking down and having to report on that because of iReports, and they just kept going back and forth on it, and so it ended up becoming... It was encroaching on the mainstream media. They were going to have to start talking about it, especially when the video came out where the actual doctor on those studies who works for the CDC said, I would never give my pregnant wife a flu shot.
Right.
On tape, Yeah. I mean, but all of that has now been, it's a long ago memory thanks to Ebola. So.
Well, thanks to the fact that we've all been, pushed down into where we have basically a 1 week memory span. I mean, I was thinking about Bergdahl the other day. No one's mentioned that guy in months. It's insane. There's just all these crazy, huge events that go on. And, as long as there's football or baseball or whatever it is that's on the television, they can distract you and keep you hypnotized. And it's crazy.
I think that's the only reason we haven't seen another Ebola case, because they're waiting for midterms. And
Absolutely.
Then after midterms are over, right as Obama's giving universal amnesty with his new executive order, he's told everyone he's going to sign for months now, then there'll be suddenly more Ebola, and everyone will have to look at that. Oh my God, Ebola.
I agree, but since we're on to Ebola, we might as well stick with this for just a second. Melissa, do you want to give your background real quick before, just for people who don't know who you are, why we're listening to you?
Sure. Okay. Well, I actually woke up after going through grad school because I was getting a master's degree on our criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know too much about that, but the whole thing is a huge racket. That's what I actually found out. I spent one class just researching Homeland Security and how through the Patriot Act, they've completely screwed up our Constitution so bad that most police departments don't even understand how to read the Fourth Amendment anymore.
Right.
Because they cite all these different Supreme Court rulings and everything. And so I wrote a whole paper just on how screwed up our Fourth Amendment has become thanks to that. Then I ended up randomly watching Loose Change one day, which is, the 9/11 documentary. And that was it for me. I was done. I was like, okay, this is obviously everything that's around us is wrong. And after researching all of that stuff, because I'm one of those, I've always been a researcher. Back when I was a little kid, my mom used to say, God, I hope you don't become a lawyer, because you're just going to be so annoying to be around. Because I refuse to ever it's Santa Claus bringing the presents, really? Let me see some evidence here. You know what I mean? I've always been that way. And after Loose Change, it was just, I started watching every documentary possible about this stuff. And now, all these years later, I'm pretty much to the point where I've realized that our entire society is based on industrial complexes that are based on human suffering. That's pretty much what they got going on.
Yeah,
so,
that's pretty concise, actually.
It's what I've come up with. It's to that point. I mean, especially the criminal justice system, when you look at that, everything that is about is putting more and more people in prison. In the United States, we put more people in prison per capita than any other country in the world. And it's just never going to stop. That's why at the federal level, they will never legalize marijuana unless they can find other reasons to put people in jail to fill the economy void that will happen from that. Because it's all about how many people we can put in jail. You know,
So the whole name of the game is revenue generation these days.
absolutely.
I don't want to get into law enforcement right now because
let's not.
I could go on some major.
But you just asked me what brought me to this, and it was all the research I did towards that master's degree,
right.
and then learning about that took me back to 9/11. I wasn't like Aaron. I wasn't on the day. I knew something was wrong, but I never suspected it was as wrong as I found out it really was, ultimately.
Well, we still don't even know how wrong it really was.
No.
I mean, I wonder if we ever will know how wrong it really was.
Oh, well, I'm sure we can only surmise, but...
Right. Well, okay, I wanted to come back then to Ebola since we brought it up. Now, I kind of went on a little bit of a mini tirade here earlier in the program about some of my impressions of what Ebola would be like if it were real and it were here in the United States. But, Melissa, you did a fantastic expose on Truthstream Media about the Ebola is real. What do you want to call it? The campaign, the Ebola is real campaign.
Propaganda.
That's going on.
It's a propaganda campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, without tipping your hat too much into letting us know exactly how you feel about it. But so what? You got me on the fence. I'm not going to lie because I felt very strongly at first that it was definitely real. But you raised a lot of good points. So I want to know if you wouldn't mind talking about that for a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. As we're being told what's going on about Ebola here, we are being told that Ebola is so bad over in Liberia, for example, that people are just dropping dead left and right in the streets everywhere. And that it's chaos and people are just leaving their dead bodies in the streets. Dogs are eating dead bodies and it's spreading Ebola. I mean, we're being told all kinds of crazy stories, right?
Right.
But if it's really so bad, then what I want to know is why there is such a campaign to get people to even believe that Ebola exists. Propaganda campaign that's being put on by the governments over there in conjunction with NGOs, in conjunction with UNICEF, the WHO. I want to know why that is. And what I mean by campaign, when I say this, when I say propaganda, I am not talking to people like, say, here in America when we think of government propaganda and we think of things you see on CNN. I am talking about the fact that the people over in this country are 24/7 washed in this message, Ebola is real. Right. And what I mean by that is they have it on billboards, it's on signs, it's spray painted on buildings. The Monrovia City Corporation, as it's called, puts up banners across the street that say Ebola is real in huge letters. For Independence Day, there are pictures of this. There's banners across the street that say, Happy Independence Day, Ebola is real. Like, okay. Ew. Then they've got people driving around in Humvees with bullhorns, bullhorning people periodically throughout the day, Ebola is real. Any video that I've watched that's been put up by African activists over there, where they interview somebody that's an official from the government, the first thing out of their mouth is always Ebola is real. There are teams of people walking around with T-shirts that say Ebola is real. It went so far that the number one hit song on the radio over there is actually a song they wrote that's a horrible auto-tuned song, which you can see on YouTube. Ebola is real. I'm not even kidding.
Are you serious?
It's a song. Ebola is real. It's auto-tuned. It's terrible. But it's the number one song on the radio. So I guess these people just love that song. I doubt it, okay? And just in case that doesn't work for the older crowd, they also have an adult contemporary version set to a patriotic song that was from the 80s called Sweet Liberia. Right. Also, Ebola is real. And if that's not enough for you, they also have it to where when you are in Liberia and you pick up your telephone, not that everyone has telephone, but you pick up the phone to make a call or receive a call, before you can even say hello, the first thing you hear on the phone is a government-sponsored message that's telling you Ebola is real. Now, my question to you is, if people are just dropping dead left and right in the streets everywhere, right, then why is that the first message that they're telling the people over there? Why is the first message not, here's how to protect yourself from Ebola? Right. I mean, that's part of the whole message as well. Well, because the number one message is that it even exists at all.
Right, which is weird because, you made a point the other day that would, if you see things like that going on around you, natural human instinct is going to take over, and you're not going to need someone to say, hey, your neighbor that just bled to death next door, that really happened. We don't need to say that really happened. We need to say, this is how you protect yourself from your neighbor who just bled to death next door.
Exactly. And I mean, there was a video that was put out that was part of my report that was put out by the New York Times where it showed, supposedly it was this father and mother who were bringing their sick older son. I mean, he was probably in his early 20s or something, to one of these hospitals for treatment for Ebola. And he's rolling around on the ground. And he said, I'm dying. And I'm not trying to judge, but he did not look sick to me at all. If he's sick, I'm Mary Poppins. The kid did not look sick at all. His coloring was fine. He had and the guy who's reporting for the New York Times, he's in the dying throes of Ebola. Really? He has no hemorrhagic rash. His eyes are completely fine. There's not even any jaundice or red spots or anything in his eyes. His coloring looks totally normal. And then later in the clip they show, he's suddenly sitting up and moving around just fine. So it's like, wait, I thought you were rolling around on the ground dying. Now you're sitting up and looking around just fine. I've seen some of the sick people they've shown. These people can barely move if they're in the dying throes of Ebola. This kid's sitting up looking around, like waiting. He's like, gosh, I've been laying here on the floor forever and they're not coming. I guess I'll just sit here and, scratch my head or whatever. And then they finally let him in. And they don't even question the parents or anything who have been, I guess, in direct contact, obviously, with this kid. Those guys just get to leave. No, hey, can you even just wash your hands or anything? As they're walking away, they're filming this dad, right? I don't know. I don't even know what happened to the supposed mother. She just was not in the shot anymore. The guy is just walking away lightning fast, the dad. And as he's walking away, I paused it. You can clearly see a wad of American cash in his hand.
What?
So I've got the videos up at youtube.com/Truthstream Media. Ebola is real. It's at the end of that video. You can clearly see this. And it's up on the New York Times. It's their YouTube. They've got it up there. I mean, you asked me what I'm supposed to take from that video. I mean,
well, I want to ask you what you take from the whole thing, because either of you guys, because it seems, obviously, it didn't dawn on me the other day when we were speaking, but you just told, when you told me that the telephone system is now integrated. So when these people pick up a call, the first thing that takes money, right?
That was the creepiest thing to me, because that is creepy. So Terry Gilliam's Brazil. That is so 1984. Because
totally.
Somehow it's even creepier than an outright police state. I think just because the police state's expected,
right?
And I'm not saying that makes the police state okay. It's just, you can understand troops lining up and like guarding people from doing this and closing the border. I don't like it. But just trying to distort reality and put in that not so subtle, like, I'm going to hit you over the head, this is the official story.
Right.
It just bothers me so much. If there's reason to think that it's a lie, and if it's not a lie, why such the hard sale? Methinks you protest too much.
Well,
yeah,
and
exactly.
The issue too is that think about all the resources that are going into auto-tuning songs.
They
and
made
to
a
this.
freaking song.
Yeah, I mean there's
and
resources there that are not being used to fight or educate people on Ebola if it is real. Which then you got to wonder where those resources are coming from.
And they're playing it on the radio. I mean, that's the thing. And they're saying it's #1 on the radio because if something's killing people in the streets, I'm sure everyone can't wait to listen to that and tap their foot along. Like that doesn't even make sense at all.
I might prefer it over Nickelback. I'm just saying.
Versus Ebola is tragedy versus we can overcome Ebola versus we can get everyone to the hospital and treat them. Ebola is real. That's where they're at.
Mean,
okay, so what do you guys think
that would be
of
like
that,
that would be like ISIS is going to kill you being the #1 song in America right now.
Right.
Yes, I can't wait to listen to that. ISIS is going to kill
But
you.
unfortunately,
That doesn't make sense.
We are at we do have questions about crisis actors. Of course, we brought up the case of this guy dying in the streets. Didn't look like he was dying, but the New York Times reporters over there trying to win a Pulitzer Prize with this dramatic narration. And
cash in his hand walking away.
I'm not saying I want to be any closer to the Ebola hot zone, but I'm not there. I'm not seeing these people. I'm not touching it. I'm not breathing the same air. I don't know what's theater, and we know that the theater's going on. Mm-hmm. We have seen the bids on Homeland Security for crisis actors. That issue has been raised, and I can get more into that in a minute, but that's been very interestingly distorted in the alternative media. But there's Wag the Dog.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a fictional film, but based on reality, or what is reality, I guess. It's a Matrix question.
Right.
Wag the Dog, the 1995 movie with Dustin Hoffman, where they literally hire a Hollywood director to direct a green screen war scenario for the consumption of the American public through the television. They created a war just as William Randolph Hearst did with his yellow journalism papers in the Spanish-American War before there was TV, through the TV where the images are emotional, they're compelling, but they're not real.
No, they're hypnotic, though.
Well,
you know.
Exactly. Well, and their hypnosis. They
Yes.
have raised since we've had the 24/7 news cycle in this country. They have raised this country on a steady diet of 24/7 fear to push them towards an agenda. And whatever they're actually showing you is never the ultimate agenda. It's usually covering up something else that's going on. But let's just look at Africa for just a second of some of the things that have been going on over there and were going on over there before this happened. You had strikes in some of the largest diamond mines. One of the largest ones is in Sierra Leone. There was a huge strike. It was going on for years. People had been shot. The workers were striking the deplorable conditions over there. I guess I haven't heard anything about that since this started.
Right.
We also had that whole thing with Boko Haram, and it was like, bring our girls home, and that whole deal. Remember that? Michelle Obama got involved in the campaign, and then everyone said, hey, wait a minute, that's fake. This is BS. Well, they don't need a reason to go over there now because now they can go over there and build treatment centers for Ebola that just so happen to have barbed wire facing, out, right?
Right.
So don't escape. Like what is that? And so that's going on. And now suddenly all the girls got brought home, right? And magically now it's all better, or they're all married or some kind of, it's whatever, but there's all these things. And then you also had reports coming out at the beginning of all of this where a lot of the people over there said this was a government conspiracy.
Right.
And that they thought it was because of the Department of Defense, because we had Department of Defense people from our biowarfare, our Army biowarfare section was over there in those exact countries where the hot zone is right now, doing testing on all kinds of monoclonal antibodies, growing these things in labs. It wasn't just even Ebola. It was Ebola. It was Lassa fever. It was all these other things that they do over there. Marburg virus. I mean, you name it. And so that was going on. And so there have been articles in the Liberian Daily Observer where they've pointed the finger at the Pentagon for this.
Right.
And a lot of people believe it is a government conspiracy, that you don't get sick and go to the hospital, that you go to the hospital and then you get sick, that you get a vaccine. That was another story that came out, that there was a meningitis campaign to vaccinate for meningitis through the Red Cross that was heavy going on before this outbreak, and a lot of those people believe that the vaccines caused whatever the sickness is, because a lot of people, even in the medical community over here, are saying that this is not behaving like regular Ebola, that there's something different about it. So you've got that. You've also got stories that came out again in the Liberian Daily Observer where multiple sightings of people dumping formaldehyde into water well supplies, which if you drink a solution of formaldehyde, I think it only has to be 30 or 40%, it will cause corrosive internal injuries, which can mimic the last stages of Ebola, because you would vomit blood, you would bleed from orifices. I mean, so there's a lot of other stuff that's going on over there that we're totally not being told. But what we are being told is every 5 seconds that there's going to be Ebola, it's going to be here. People are completely freaked out and just impotent with fear, to the point that they don't even have to have Ebola here. They just have to have an Ebola scare on Twitter, and that will be enough to get people to do whatever it is they want. And what they want, I think, is for people to take this $1 billion vaccination that they're getting ready to produce.
And yet the Americans who've come down with Ebola have acted in ways that are contrary to logic, contrary to how you would deal with the disease, and it defies, it boggles the mind to try to make that narrative work. Something is very wrong with that narrative. I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't doubt the existence of the disease, because I know it was created in a biowarfare lab.
It was created during vaccination creation.
But
in the 70s.
Theater of the mind, I don't know what these people were really diagnosed with, because they seem to be magically cured.
Well, what's up with Dr. Craig Spencer, this latest guy? Now that his LinkedIn is scrubbed and people are questioning if he even exists, there's a video out there where they interviewed somebody his neighbor. She lived in the building with him, and they said, "This is him, right?" And showed a picture, and she goes, "No," and she made a face like it wasn't, unless she
was
was
not
acting.
Faked. No way, that was not acting.
Instant reaction though,
right?
And then people in the comments section of the video are like, "Oh, they could have showed her a picture of Obama or something." Like, why would all these alternative and mainstream media sources show up at this girl and suddenly show her a picture of Obama just to do? That's stupid. That doesn't even make sense. That's ridiculous, of course. But she was like, "No, I don't know who that is." And then you have this Casey Hickox woman who's coming over with Doctors Without Borders. She scrubbed her LinkedIn page to get rid of all ties to the CDC, and the fact that she's part of this elite
like a Secret Service CDC person. Yeah.
It's epidemiologic intelligence service.
Her own university called it the CIA of the CDC.
It's the CIA of the CDC. They only put 70 people in that program a year. Right. She goes over there and does her thing. She comes back over here and is so blatantly angry about having to self-quarantine in her home for 21 days and not possibly infect family and friends that she's like, screw you guys, I'm going to ride my bike and go get pizza. I don't even care. That is not a normal behavioral reaction.
Especially
somebody,
a healthcare professional. That's like the Spencer guy who's like, okay, I'm doing my self-quarantine. I'm taking my temperature, twice a day like I'm supposed to, but I'm feeling a little fatigued. I think I'm going to go for a 3-mile jog through the busiest city in America and get sweaty all over everybody. That seems like
go bowling or whatever.
Go bowling and get a pizza or whatever. It's like that's why I'm so on the fence about this whole thing, you guys, because I understand that there's a propaganda that's taking place over in Africa, and I think it's probably for the benefit of us, given all of the things that we've talked about now. It seems to me that the Ebola is real. They want everybody to associate Africa and Ebola. They just want to make that association blanket so that you just don't have any thoughts about, the diamond mines or the fact that China wants to get in there, the fact that the 3 countries that are the most affected by Ebola right now have huge oil reserves off the coast that we probably want to have something to do with. They don't want you thinking about any of that. They just want you to think
Absolutely
Africa, Ebola. But the other side of that is that when it comes back to our country,
they brought it here so many times they can't.
Well, of course,
count.
Of course. But I think that there is a certain amount of doom that could definitely result if it does get out here in America because of exactly what we just talked about. These people who are supposedly trained health professionals that really just don't seem to care or are a part of the agenda. Unless they know
something we don't.
Yes.
Because here's the thing: these vaccines. I've got a video that when this was really starting to go down, I put up a whole lot of videos on this, and one was of this doctor.
Wait, I gotta stop you guys. I think we're going to a break right now.
Oh, break?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out the...
Enemy Within Radio with Tom Barnes and Tommy Woodgate. Saturdays on Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 3rd day of November. This is your Red Pill Reports, the first broadcast in what we hope will be many, 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 many more broadcasts to come. And we are right now fanatically happy to be joined by Mr. Aaron Dykes and Miss Melissa Melton from Truthstream Media. I would highly recommend everyone go on and check out their website. Just from a technical website standpoint, it is easily one of the nicest websites I've ever seen. You guys absolutely crush that website. It is beautiful. Honestly, you go there and it's staggering how well organized everything is and how free flowing everything is.
That's Melissa Melton. She's beautiful on the outside and inside. She got
oh, come
whole
on.
thing going on.
Well, you guys are awesome.
I'm just to the point on that website that if something doesn't look right to me, I'm going to talk about it, and maybe I sound like a completely crazy person, but maybe there's a point to it. So, I mean, it's time to start asking some questions. Nothing makes sense. This world, the stuff that's going on makes no sense.
I agree. That's why we're all here. I mean, this whole thing, we're trying to create another forum for people to get interesting insight and factual information that they may not be able to get anyplace else. And I love that that's what you guys do, and that's obviously what we're going to try and do here, and look forward to working together in
Definitely.
the future. So what is there anything else about Ebola that you guys think we need to mention right now? Or
I just think that, we did a report on the guy who is behind the vaccine that's being made. He's been behind edible vaccines as a push for decades. He's made a lot of money off of DARPA contracts, and that guy is the same guy who we have on tape joking about culling 2 billion people off the planet with a genetically engineered virus.
Yeah, he was at a conference or something, and somebody asked him a question. Is that the same guy?
Yeah, he was. He was. It was a room full of grad students, and they were giving a talk. And actually, I need to go back and probably watch the whole 2 hours because they were talking. There was something on there about water resources. So that's becoming pretty important these days.
That's Charles Arntzen. He's out of Arizona State University, and he's been heavily funded from the Rockefeller Foundation and lots of other biggies, and also the U.S. biowarfare research.
But this vaccine is going to be pushed through. They're defying all basic moral standards when it comes to what you normally do in these studies. And most drugs they put out are short-term studies anyway. There are no long-term drug studies, but this is expedited. So they're already testing things on humans that they shouldn't be allowed to at this point. This is all going to be experimental. But the people at the top, the director over at the NIH is talking about how they're going to have to vaccinate whole countries to get this outbreak under control. That's just all it's going to take. All this other stuff they're doing is not going to work. And our medical infrastructure is not ready for an actual outbreak should one occur here. So think about that going into flu season, I would say to people.
Well, I think about that now. I said to you guys the other day that if you're going to get Ebola, right now is the time to get Ebola. While the hospital lines are low, and you can get in, and the hospital workers might still be coming to work, things like that.
This is the point. I've done articles on this. There are ER doctors that are coming out to say all a hospital can offer you in a viral situation like that is fluids, rest, and prayer. You might as well stay home. You will have less of a chance of getting not only sick from other people, but making other people sick. And on top of that, he's done studies where whole hospitals can be ground to a halt just by a couple of the housekeepers who are the lowest paid people calling out sick because they can't move patients through the hospital. Will grind them to a halt.
Not to mention the MRSA and everything else.
Oh, right.
Yeah, exactly. But once you've got all of the bureaucracy and all of the cleanliness and all of the procedures that have to go into caring for 2 Ebola patients in a hospital. He said 2 in a day is about the most hospitals would be able to handle, having to isolate and do all these things, tests and whatever. By the time you're done with that and all the cleanup, if you got a couple of housekeepers calling out sick, whole hospital will grind to a halt. And we already see nurses calling out sick on Craig Spencer. So, and that's nurses. That's not the people that get paid $8 an hour to change the sheets.
Right, who would ostensibly be the first people who are not going to go to work, because I wouldn't go to work.
Going to a hospital does not increase your chances of survival in a situation like that at all.
No, it would decrease your chances just because of what Aaron just mentioned. You go in there and you get cured of Ebola, and all of a sudden you got MRSA and you die, or they cut your leg off or whatever. It's like, if a hospital can prove to me that they can wipe out MRSA, then I might give them the benefit of the doubt.
On a whole side note, we did a whole research jag on how copper is not only antimicrobial and antibacterial, but copper plating could kill MRSA. And just if hospitals installed, copper top plates on door handles and on hospital beds and stuff like that,
switches,
which would cost a couple billion for the whole country, but in the end would be a good investment, they could pretty much wipe out MRSA, or at least, repel it heavily.
But they're not doing that. So.
Well, no, and they're not going to do the right. I mean, Aaron, when we were speaking the other night, you said very matter-of-factly that if there was going to be a solution to this, it would be mobile quarantine units. It would be that they would send a trailer to your house with a doctor who would pull the person out of the home and keep you in your front yard in a secure place where you're not going to go. That makes sense to me. That's a plan that I could
Melissa,
see.
But yeah.
Sorry, Melissa.
No, exactly, though. I mean, the ER doctor who's been in ER, he's testified before Congress about hospital readiness in mass casualty situations, and he was saying this is going to overwhelm our medical system. There is no way for our medical system to be prepared for this in any kind of way, or any kind of way. He was talking about Spanish flu, too. He said there's no way, based on what I just said about housekeepers calling out, and that it makes so much more sense to send a suited hazmat suited healthcare worker to someone's home with clean linens to do the tests and everything else, and keep that person quarantined so that they don't expose themselves potentially to other people who could get sick or could make them sick, and spread this around and grind hospitals to a halt with this heavy protocol and bureaucratic processes. And he was saying that, and absolutely, if we can deliver the mail and clean people's trash, we can do it that way too. But that would make too much sense, and nothing our government has done in the response to this makes any sense. I was telling you, my 6-year-old son could probably mount a response to this Ebola crisis that would make more sense than what we have seen at every turn from the people in our government.
And I told you he would have my vote at this point because of the people that I've seen. But what I'm struggling with then is trying to find a sense of balance, because what you're suggesting to me is that the motivation behind vaccination is real. They're gonna make a lot of money. They need to get everybody vaccinated. The only way to do that really effectively is to drive up the fear a lot.
Absolutely.
And we're not able to really do that by pointing at the bad things that are happening in Africa. Really, fundamentally, we're not able to, there's too much of a disconnect geographically, and we just don't connect to those people in terms of, even though we do, airplane travel and things like that, we don't really think about it. So for me, for them to drive up the fear here while at the same time trying to preserve the economy. Because, again, you talk about shutting down hospitals, or you start talking about shutting down airlines, or you start getting the fear out there so people are not going to work and not going to school. That's going to have a catastrophic effect on the economy. So how are you going to balance? I mean, this is obviously just a question, but, how would they balance trying to make a whole bunch of money with a vaccine while
it's targeted?
It's got to be, and it's got to be really.
I think this is the seeds of chaos. I think that's how the stock market works and government as well. A disruptive event is going to make money up and down for those in the know who know how to make money. It hardly matters what the truth of the situation is. And that's going to happen with the drought. That's probably something I'm going to look into in a little bit. But, I neglected to mention this earlier. About 2 weeks ago, Breitbart, townhall.com, a bunch of these places reported how the Obama administration began expediting visas from West African countries back in August. And that was a couple months after Ebola had already started there.
Wow.
Expediting.
They
not saying, hey,
that's
maybe
the opposite of slowing them
they
down.
expedited it. They worked with the reportedly they worked with the law firm Edward Neufeld III based in Washington, D.C. to get extensions for visas, to grant visas to people from West Africa to make it easier for them to get, just to sum it up overall. And Melissa said it perfectly several weeks ago. They've done everything they could to bring Ebola to America. Mm-hmm. And I think it's...
that very first doctor, that was paid for by the State Department, like $500,000 or something to fly in that special plane that had the Ziploc bags and twisty ties or whatever it was they had on the plane and fly that guy over here. I mean, this is...
Did you guys notice when he got out of the ambulance, too, at the hospital? Like, he walked out of the ambulance and they walked him across gravel in a hazmat suit. Wouldn't want him to fall down and tear the suit or anything.
Unprotected photographer across the street taking pictures. The nurse that came right after him, they wheeled her in because obviously the criticism. And then there was just some guy standing on the sidewalk talking on a cell phone and all these people in hazmat suits, and they didn't go, oh, hey, buddy, we're wheeling this lady in with the Ebola. You might want to kind of go over there or something. They didn't say anything. They just let him stand. It just doesn't make sense. Nothing they're doing makes any sense. So you can't look at it rationally.
I think we know by now the Obama administration, the New World Order, et cetera, all these groups are deeply steeped in authoritarianism, even though it's hidden, it's cloaked, it's behind the veil, but their change comes through chaos.
Right.
And this is why we see so many crazy events. That's why there's always a boogeyman, a new terrorist group, a Cold War for years. All these things, scandals on a regular basis, disease outbreaks. I think we can all remember from our generation what a propaganda psyop AIDS was for a whole decade. There was the facts of AIDS, the things they didn't know, but then there's just the whole culture of fear that I think I was largely raised around. There were jokes about it and references. What if you get it? I didn't know till I was an adult that AIDS was really just something that statistically affected Africans, and that some countries had 40% of their black population with AIDS and were sick and dying of it. And, it was being spread obviously by means other than sexual intercourse. And here we are over here with the scapegoated gay community and things like that. And, but just not a real rational sense of how this isn't really a Westerner's disease.
Well, and that makes me wonder if this whole Ebola thing is, AIDS 2.0. If we are, if perhaps, I'm of the opinion that we released AIDS over there to, for depopulation purposes.
I've seen memos.
Right, of course. So my thought then would be, was it not successful enough? Were the people who wanted, the places like the slums like Monrovia to be wiped out, were they not successful enough? So now we've got to really do something that's,
Well, Doctor,
I know you're. Oh, go ahead.
Dr. Eric Pianka said himself in his speech that was so controversial a few years ago that AIDS was too slow and they wanted airborne Ebola. Those were actually his words.
That's just crazy to think that. But
and the thing is that Africans, that country is developing only because it's being kept in a developing state by multinational corporations and Western governments. There's no reason why they have so many resources over there. And the young Africans that are coming up now with social media are asking these questions. They're saying, "Hey, why is our country so rich and yet we're all so freaking poor? It doesn't even make any sense." And then they come over here and go to like the Young African Summit, and Obama comes out and says, "Well, not everyone can have a nice house and air conditioning. The planet will they'll boil over and tells them this kind of crap, which is what a bunch of lies. I mean, so obviously, but there's a reason why they want to keep these people in artificial scarcity, keep their country always developing, never developed, because they're raping the entire continent. That entire continent is being raped. By multinational corporations and governments behind them. So,
and now we're going to fight China for the privilege of continuing that effort, I believe.
Yeah, and it's about to come home here too with this North American Union stuff that's getting ready to happen here. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up because Aaron, I know, has been both you guys, I know, have really been digging into that, and it's funny because the North American Union, that's not something you even hear about anymore. That was a huge thing. It was almost like an urban myth type status a few years ago. Everybody was worried about it, and then it just kind of, like another thing, falls off the radar. But you guys are pretty determined. You guys are pretty sure that it hasn't fallen off the radar, right?
It's about to come back big way.
It hasn't been reported, but it's I think a lot of people who know my work know that I've been to a number of Bilderberg conferences. I've spoken with Jim Tucker, Daniel Estulin. I've done a lot of reading on my own, and in particular, I've mapped the names and traced the companies they're from, and I frequently just look up to see what they're doing, and all the time find conspiratorial points in the sky that end up being traced into constellations. And, Bilderberg takes credit for setting up the European Union. It's something they started more than 50 years ago, and it took them that long to bring to fruition. So just keep that in mind. It started with the European coal and steel community that was between just a handful of the countries. It expanded to other economic agreements. It gradually became political, and now they have this authoritarian, top-down, bureaucratic rule by the European Union Council and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing has been planned for the world because, of course, they're planning global government. They're not leaving it to chance. They're not letting this be a gradual thing, even though one of the propaganda points is how, well, the world's just shrinking, we're all one people, these borders are silly, these kind of things. It's very much being planned and concocted. It's very much the kind of globalists who would attend Bilderberg, the Rockefellers, and what have you. And not only have we seen the North American Union it's been going on at least since NAFTA, and we're now 20 years into NAFTA.
Right.
So if that gives you a parallel to the 50 years it took for the European Union, that'll tell you maybe about where we're at. In 2006, George W. Bush signed the Security and Prosperity Partnership for North America, which was based on a Council on Foreign Relations white paper from the year before, 2005, called Building a North American Community. And at the time, it was big news with, in particular, Lou Dobbs, reporters like Jerome Corsi, and large sectors of the alternative media. But when it got brought up in mainstream, it was a myth. It wasn't real. It was people who were cuckoo. And, it was to marginalize Ron Paul if he dared mention it, this kind of stuff. But it is still ticking along. There have been a number of reports in the meantime, but I think there's been a major update. The Council on Foreign Relations 2 weeks ago published a report called North America, Time for a New Focus. And it covers the same basic stuff of globalism, erasing borders. They're definitely in favor of immigration reform, easy flow for migrant workers, ease of visas, new understanding of who could be from what country. They want Central American people coming into North America to work. They want the Mexicans. But the biggest thing that I didn't see before, maybe it was there somewhere buried and I just hadn't noticed, is the updates to the energy grid. And this actually does intersect with Africa because since the 70s, we've had the petrodollar. And that's when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. And in 73, the oil crisis has started, which were manufactured and manipulated with the work of Kissinger, who was at the time not only National Security Administrator, but also Secretary of State.
Right.
Currently. He was the secret government behind Nixon. And he's been a Rockefeller Foundation and Rockefeller family trustee since the time he was tapped to go to Harvard University. Okay?
Right. Okay.
So he's a lifelong Rockefeller go-to guy. And that year at Bilderberg, 73, they arranged for the oil crisis and came up with a scheme that when the OPEC countries held the world hostage on oil prices, they would recycle their money on Wall Street and allow the Wall Street, City of London people to become rich and the rest of the world to have to buy the expensive money and ultimately have money that was diverted through the Federal Reserve Wall Street system, okay? Mm-hmm. This was a way to hold the nations of the world hostage and make them subservient to U.S. dominance. Today we know that the petrodollar is declining. That's super important. It's going to be gradual. We know Russia, China are against it. They're talking about a basket of currencies,
Right.
and we'll probably even see a global currency. In the meantime, finally, America will get to see the domestic production they've been demanding since at least the 70s. Didn't do it. Couldn't do it through the Reagan administration despite promises, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now they're going to shift into that if you can buy this new Council on Foreign Relations report. They want muchos fracking. It's already going on. There's reports about how it causes everything from groundwater contamination to earthquakes to upset neighbors, rezoning for residential, big environmental problems, but easy shale gas energy has created a new boom, and they're just going to expand it not only in the United States, but in Mexico, Canada, etc. And they talk about in the report having the XL Keystone pipeline approved as well. And on top of that, they're talking about an interconnected Mexico, U.S., Canada power grid.
Wow.
Mexico will be on our power grid. And we already have lots of problems with our power grid. They're, first of all, talking about how it's crumbling. Second of all, talking about how an EMP attack, a terrorist attack, a cyber attack, or anything else could bring it down globally. I mean, that is across the whole system in the U.S. or locally in certain areas of the energy sector. They say it's very vulnerable. And we know on the agenda is a new smart grid, power grid that would require billions and billions of dollars of new investment. And now they're talking about hooking up to Mexico. We've already got rolling brownouts and blackouts. And to top that off, the introduction of the Obama administration has meant officially designating carbon dioxide as a pollutant. It has meant the EPA got to finally start regulating coal-fired power plants. And so in Texas in particular, where so much of that coal-fired stuff is powering electricity grids, they have begun artificially shutting off production, though they could clearly produce more, and creating brownouts and blackouts and higher prices, premium prices in both the winter and the summer.
Wow.
And we have actually been getting power from Mexico for a number of years.
See, that's a surprise. I think that really shocked me when you told me that. I had no idea that our grid was connected like that. That's just shocking to me because I wondered, who's making money off of that? If is there one industry, or how does that resource volume flow through there? Are we supplying power to them? Are they supplying power to us? Who's paying for it?
There's actually backflows in either direction. And just in case you weren't paying attention, in Ukraine, natural gas has become a super weaponized thing. Of course, Russia supplies most of the gas to, or a very large portion, at least a full quarter to Europe, very important in wintertime for heating and stuff. And through the crisis of Crimea and the Ukrainian civil war, that's become weaponized. The U.S. has tried to block Russian gas, make it seem shameful. They're trying to open up new shale gas fields there so they could supply Europe, and there's just a whole political shift there. There were terrorism acts against their gas. So, I mean, obviously, we already know how big energy is, but
right.
It's going to become important in new ways in the U.S. in the coming years. In this report, the authors, Robert Zoellick, who was at the World Bank under George W. Bush, he's now the senior advisor for Goldman Sachs International. He says they want candidates in 2016 on both sides of the aisle to follow these agenda points. So that means if Hillary runs, if Jeb runs, if Rand Paul runs, if Ted Cruz runs, whoever it is, Joe Biden, they want them reflecting these Council on Foreign Relation points. And at a backdoor, we know who pulls the strings kind of way, they expect them to bring these points up. So I would look for these agenda points.
Well, it makes sense too. And if you think about Biden's son just taking a job over in the Ukraine at their largest natural gas producer.
Right.
I mean, there's just so much. You can't start looking into these issues and not see the agenda. It's so apparent these days. It's crazy. But
I'll give you one final detail on that. This most recent report at the CFR was co-authored by two people, co-chaired. David Petraeus, who was, of course, defense secretary and CIA director, resigned in kind of a piddly scandal. Like, who cares?
Right.
I mean, his wife cares, obviously, but that's pretty much it. And now he's been given a newly created position at KKR, Kravis, Kohlberg, and Roberts, the biggest leverage firm out there, who attend Bilderberg annually, directed by Henry Kravis, a major Bush family insider who goes back several generations. David Petraeus now at KKR, and Robert Zoellick, as I mentioned, at Goldman Sachs. these are the authors of the CFR report. In 2007, when the North American Union was actually in the news, they were the two companies behind the largest ever leverage buyout in all of history for $45 billion of Texas Energy, TXU Energy, which owned like 9 out of the 12 coal-fired power plants, which were quickly regulated by the EPA.
Right.
In no less than 2 years after they bought out this company. And with all their inside knowledge, with what Goldman Sachs and KKR are involved in, I really have to wonder if they didn't buy it out so they can make money off of the austerity of artificial scarcity and the other new energy markets they knew were coming.
I like how you're pretend to wonder about that, because I don't think there's really any conjecture. All right, guys. So brilliant reporting, and I love that you guys are keeping up on the NAU, and we will definitely be keeping up to date with you guys on that. I wanted to. We've only got a few minutes left, maybe 3 or 4, but I want to switch to Jeb versus Hillary, because I think the word doomed just keeps coming up in my mind over and over every time I talk to you guys. But so I know you guys have some opinions on the Jeb versus Hillary thing. If you would lay them on us, I'd appreciate it.
Who do you want to vote for? I mean, it's like that South Park episode. It's a douche and a turd sandwich. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that on your first show. Sorry to say that on your first show. But there's no difference between the interests that these two people serve at all. No. And like I said to you, maybe one of them will wear a dress, but I can't even tell which one that's going to be. These are the same people, and they're all about the same stuff. They're all about NAFTA and the NAU, both of them, all the way. So they're going to do whatever, the fact that the Bush family, they're putting out articles in the New York Times, the Bush family's fired up at the idea of another Clinton-Bush presidential election.
Right.
Ew. Don't make me. It's like you make me throw up. I mean, this is the funniest thing about it, though, is that it's going to definitely be. It's not going to be the vote between the lesser of two evils like we normally get. It'll just be a vote between evil and evil. That's it. And they're going to shove it down the throats of everyone, because even while you have people like right now, people are still arguing. If you go to any MSNBC article or Fox News article that's even the slightest bit political and look at the comments, you've got people fighting each other like fifth graders about, the left and right paradigm. But when you have put out articles about the potential of a Bush v. Clinton presidential election 2016 run, everybody agrees, no, we do not want these political, unofficial dynasty families in our country. We do not want them running things anymore. No more Bushes, no more Clintons, and everybody agrees.
Right.
Everybody gets together and agrees on that point at least. So that's I think that's almost sad in a way. I mean, it's great that people are actually agreeing with each other for once on something, but because usually they just use the left-right paradigm to divide everyone.
Right.
But on this particular point, everybody can agree. And so this is the thing. If it doesn't matter which one of these people wins, we're going to still get the same New World Order crap we've been getting, the same oligarchy we've been getting, regardless.
Yeah, and then you can even, make the issue more difficult by throwing Rand Paul and his Israel First stance in there, which absolutely confuses everyone to death, and Ted Cruz and his wife. So, I mean, it's like cherry-flavored Robitussin versus castor oil. I don't want either. I don't want any of these people. And to be honest, I didn't really talk about my stance on voting, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I don't vote. I'm not a voter. I'm not ever going to vote. There's no confidence, and honestly, I believe that if you want a master, you should by all means go out and vote for one. But I feel pretty confident that I can self-regulate. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with.
Confidence, and I'll have to admit I got conned a few times, and I'm done with it.
There's just no reason. We need to all shun it like the Amish. We need to all shun the voting process in this country. It is run by corporations and money, and that's it. 91% of the people who win in these elections that everyone's going to go vote in tomorrow is just the person who had the most money.
We're running out of time, guys. I love you guys for being here. Thank you so much. Everybody go see Truthstream Media. Check out their website and support Truth Frequency Radio. This is Red Pill Reports. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Thanks, guys. Love ya.